The world is changing at breathtaking speeds, with trends and fads popping up and passing away at breakneck pace. Against that backdrop of nearly constant upheaval, we welcome you to the Sunday Scotch Society. Over delectable, sumptuous scotches and with the occasional good cigar in hand, we have open, honest, and uninhibited conversation about whatever strikes our fancy. Whether it's the critical issue of the day or a deep dive down the rabbit hole, we take it all seriously while having a good time. Join us for a stiff drink and a great conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, yes, Matthew is in fact wearing a sock.
I am not. My mic is wearing a sock. I have on a regular pair of socks, but so does my mic.
Your mic is wearing a pair of socks, Matthew?
A pair. Everyone knows that one sock on a mic does nothing.
And a pair of socks.
A little bit better.
I see.
A little bit better.
Okay, well.
But I mean, let's not be insane and get out like 3 pair. That would just be weird.
I mean, there's so,
wouldn't that be weird?
There's so much time.
That would be odd, I would say.
I'm just gonna leave. Check it out. I have to leave that alone only because, as a diversionary tactic, that is an extremely skillful diversionary tactic. Because that's a rabbit hole down which almost every fiber of my very, very densely fibered being is begging me to go.
The little grey cells?
Yes.
They're thinking?
Yes, Monsieur Poirot, they are thinking very, very deeply. But I will play the Captain Hastings to your Poirot today and allow most things to just go over my head.
Sir, I would like to wish you a very happy 12,025 HE.
Thank you for your very cryptic
Not
good
cryptic
wishes.
at all.
I disagree.
Okay.
I think it's quite cryptic. Mainly because as a person...
Obscure, perhaps.
But is obscurity not a type of crypticism?
Intention, I think, is part and parcel of being able to genuinely call something cryptic.
But neither obscure nor cryptic is by definition intentional. They are simply...
I don't know. I don't know.
Those are simply adjectives that describe a state of being. They are not markers of intentionality.
I tell you what, the interwebs...
Which we all know we can trust implicitly 100%.
I mean, if you can't, what can you trust?
I don't think that you can trust anything at this point, Matthew. Well, that's not true. You can trust me when I tell you that this haircut is quite attractive.
We have arrived... Oh, well, you brought me back from the brink of Nietzschean nihilism. Because if you can't trust anything, I was about to go and jump off the pier here.
A well-placed compliment will do that.
But you brought me back.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yes. But HE, Holocene era. It is a tipping of the hat to the fact that, one, we've been around a little while, and two, it's less arbitrary than any particular religion's set point. If you look at Wikipedia and look up any year, let's say 25 BC, they will give you a list of all the different calendars and what the date was for that particular calendar.
Mm.
Just get rid of all of that. Put a 1 in front. Good to go.
Okay. Well then,
and then it's secondarily, but but not less, a tip to the hat of the idea of getting civilization to think a little bit more in deep time. There's a there's an organization called the Long Now Foundation, who, um, rather erroneously, in my opinion, they like to put a zero in front of the year to just to make you think, hey, I'm gonna be this. It's a long stretch. Let's think. They made a clock called the 10,000 year clock. Um, but why they didn't just reference the beginning of our civilization? I don't know.
See, this is the problem with deep thinkers, Matthew, is that the subterranean depths of their thought, generally back to our earliest comment in this particular digression, are shrouded in obscurity and are therefore
But not
sometimes
cryptic.
too cryptic
No, not
for
cryptic.
us to fathom.
No, I'm gonna getting back to the point of I'm gonna query various sources regarding cryptic, and we'll get back to that
Okay.
during the show.
Okay.
However, I don't want this to divert us too much from just celebrating the fact that, however arbitrary it is a new year.
It is, absolutely. If January is in fact the beginning of the year.
I mean, it is for us. That's why I said arbitrary. You know,
And if we accept that, what is true for us is true.
well, I didn't know that we were finally getting into the 3-hour podcast era, which I've been I've been waiting for.
I'm sure.
So-
That was the initial impetus, if I recall, was at least a 2-hour conversation, since it is a podcast. But given our medium constraints and different variables, we have found ourselves generally accepting a 1-hour time limit. But I know that this chafes you, and here in 2025. I believe that we will find some flexibility to go back to first loves.
You know what I would say to that? Let's drink to that.
And with that, I think it's fair to say to our listening audience, welcome to the Sunday Scotch Society. This is our first pod of 2025. And we are incredibly excited to have a whole new year to spend with you. And I'm Kyle Quincy Parker. I am incredibly excited about these next 52 weeks and the opportunities that we will have with the spirits to see what life really is like.
Spirit unbounded.
Perhaps you should introduce yourself here at the beginning of 2025.
I am Matthew B. Kelly, of course. I apologize. I'm just so used to you hitting that I don't know, in the moment forgot about it. I do apologize.
No apology is necessary. Matthew, this is a journey that does have some structure. We agreed after we jumped off this particular conversational cliff in 2024 that we would keep a record of sorts of the highlights of our tasting journeys. And to that end, we created a list which had some caveats attached to it, which we can explore as necessary. But the list was, for what it's worth, populated. And I would like to, before we begin the 2025 era, go through the list from 2024.
We'll see how much I can remember.
I made some notes.
I'm also going to strive to be super succinct one-word descriptions from memory, if any at all are elicited,
Then
to
I will.
complement your, I'm sure, verbose description.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I read this list,
The bear is so easy to poke.
I feel conflicted because Matthew continues, even in this new year, to attempt to, how should I say, rile and discomfit me for what is 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 clearly his own personal glee and pleasure. And I'm glad to present such joy in what must be an otherwise barren, arid, depressing existence. that this is how you get your kicks, Matthew.
In that case, I thank you, sir.
Yeah, you, you're welcome. Folks. Anyway, so the 2024 list for the Sunday Scotch Society. Again, the list, just to be clear, what the list is our agreed drams that we thought were extraordinary enough that we would recommend unreservedly on behalf of the podcast, not just a single person's recommendation or seal of approval, but something that we thought was extraordinary enough that the podcast could put its, what should we call it, imprimatur on this particular spirit, this particular expression of the distillery, and say that we think this is extraordinary. Which is not to say that the other things that we sipped throughout the year were not good or even extraordinary in their own right, but the list is for those things that we thought were special. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, and I'm certainly some things need context, but I'm a little tired of having to give an explanation for every little thing. Of course, the lists have caveats.
But it was you who insisted that we make a note that the list had caveats.
We did that.
Do you know what, folks? Anyhow, I move on. The first spirit, and the list is populated in chronological order. Now, after we go through the list, I will ask Matthew.
I'm trying to behave.
I will ask Matthew the question as to which of these spirits he would place as the Sunday Scotch Society Sip of the Year 2024. But we'll get to that and his reasoning in due course. So the first spirit to make the list in 2024 was the Macallan 18-year-old Sherry Oak. The nose was this was fairly early in our podcast journey through single malt land together, and so we were still developing vocabulary, a shared vocabulary to understand and interpret these drams, these tipples, in a way that we felt was easily understood. And so when it comes to the nose on this one, we both felt that it had an amazing nose with candy and dried fruit. My notes say that we talked about buttermilk and almond, and the obviousness of the sherry in the sherry cask aging was we both felt quite pleasant. Matthew spoke about a kiss of sunshine That's a direct quote on the nose. And then we got to the sip, which for us was redolent of brown sugar and candied fruit and some sort of nut element. My notes say banana and coconut with white pepper and cinnamon. With the the Macallan 18-year-old sherry oak, we started with the sort of almost arbitrary point list. I put this one at a 5 out of 5. Matthew put it at a 4.8 out of 5, with some commentary about how nothing really should be 5 out of 5 right out of the gate anyway. So we both thought very highly of the Macallan 18-year-old single malt, the sherry oak cask edition. That's what my notes say for our first entry onto the list. My personal recollection is there's a sort of an oiliness to a single malt Scotch that's been aged for a long time, 12 years or longer, and that oiliness is from the wood, and that it serves to coat the tongue to a degree, and that was the first sort of thing that I really noticed about the Macallan 18 sherry oak. And the next thing I noticed about it was that as alcohol forward as it is, it was still mildly sugary, and even with the sharp notes from the nut and the white pepper, there was a sort of a roundness, and I think that's what we were trying to capture when we talk about banana or coconut. There's something really round about that flavor. I remember enjoying it very much, which is why, of course, I gave it 5 out of 5. That's my recollection of the Macallan 18-year-old sherry oak, Matthew.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with, as you've already noted, Drop of Sunshine.
The next entry onto the list it was, and these first couple, I noticed it as we as I was looking through the list. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But the next entry on the list is the Naked Malt, which is a blended malt whiskey, which contains the Macallan with, to a lesser degree, the Highland Park and the Glenrothes single malts, all blended together. And they make for an absolute delight. And I don't have notes on the nose or the sip from the show, but my recollection of the Naked Malt, which is fairly easy for me to recall because I love this bottle, and I try to keep it in my cupboard fairly regularly. But it has all of the complexities on the nose of the best single malt whiskeys, and the sip is, to my mind, what they did was they took all of the pleasant notes from the single malt whiskeys, the sweetness, the butteriness, the smokiness, the roundness, and combined them in a way that minimizes some of the sharpness and some of the distinctiveness of what makes the Macallan the Macallan. the Highland Park, the Glenrothes, the distinctive characteristics of the single malts are turned down so that when you sip the naked malt, what you're getting is sort of all of the sweetness and roundness of all of those other single malts, all in one sip, which I thought was, and still think, is quite extraordinary. It's funny to me because it makes a play for the best blended malt whiskey I ever had. But the other best blended malt whiskey I ever had is the famous Grouse, particularly the famous Grouse Smoky Black, which I would have put on the list, but Matthew said he didn't think it was quite list worthy. And list placement for us has to be unanimous. So that's my recollection of the naked malt, a blended malt whiskey. I would have. We did not score this one, but I would have put it at a very high 4.5, 4.6 out of 5. What are your thoughts there, Matthew?
I confess and I apologize. I cannot isolate a distinct memory of this particular tipple.
Well, if that's the case, maybe it shouldn't be on the list after all.
I made my judgment in the moment.
You did.
But
you did.
But what lasts? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
I remember the Macallan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that is saying something that we'll come back to after we get to the rest of the list. The next one on the list is the Highland Park 12-year-old Viking Honor. And this is another single malt. The notes here say there are no notes on the nose, but the sip, we noted fruit and honey and smoke. And I have a note here from Quincy Parker that this is a delicious single malt whiskey. Now, my personal bias here is plain, because as I said when we did this, the Highland Park 12-year-old was the single malt that introduced me to single malt whiskeys. This was, and I shared the story about how Ron Wheeler, who conducted the orchestra at my university and was my conducting professor, invited me over to listen to some music and introduced me to single malt Scotch by offering me a glass of the Highland Park 12-year-old, which was his favorite whiskey. So it is a sentimental choice for me, but the fact that it's on the list means that Matthew also thought it was extraordinary.
I thought it was great. I didn't necessarily think it was my cup of tea in terms of like would I go back to this given what else is on the list. And so the memory that I have is that this is robust. That's what I'm going to call that one.
Fair enough. The next sip on the list shows some of the diversity of our sipping, and I think you're actually going to you're going to quite enjoy this because the next thing on the list is the High West Double Rye, which is a bourbon that is out of Utah, which is one of these non-traditional whiskey production places, especially in the United States. You associate bourbon with Kentucky, Tennessee. You don't associate it with Utah, and even New York has some bourbons and whiskeys, but Utah just is such a strange place to think of having a whiskey produced. But then when you think of the mountains and the whatever else, the cold weather and so on and so forth, the temperature and the climate is reminiscent of Scotland to some degree. So it actually makes sense that they would produce a really nice whiskey in that climate and those temperatures. But the double rye is obviously spicy, warm and round. The thing that struck me about this was the amazing complexity and sweetness of the nose, which for a rye whiskey is very unusual because rye whiskeys generally tend to be a lot sharper because rye as a grain is a very sharp grain.
Right, but you said this was a bourbon so is that more of the corn character?
No, that bourbon really. So a rye whiskey means that the preponderance of the grain is rye, not corn.
Right.
And so, yeah, there may be some corn in the mash, but the two different types of rye is where the high West got its moniker as a double rye.
Okay, yeah. So I just heard you say double rye bourbon.
Yeah, it is. It is a bourbon.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of rye, though, my understanding is that was the original whiskey of the U.S.
Of the U.S., yes, yeah. Absolutely. Our time with Uncle Nearest helped to confirm that fact. But yeah, rye was the first grain that Americans used to create whiskey. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the High West Double Rye at all?
Very vaguely, which is a little. It borders on embarrassment because I tend to like the rye, but maybe that's an opinion formed before I started tasting with you widely enough. So, which I guess we'll see later today.
Yeah.
Just drop some foreshadowing.
The thing too is, I mean, we sipped a lot of stuff, man. You know, if I could pull out a list of all of the different things that we tasted over the years, 50 or so whiskeys, you know. So it's not surprising that some of them got lost in the fog of memory. The next thing on the list is the Highland Park 18. And all I have is a note that it is on the list. It's a single malt whiskey. I quite enjoyed it, but I don't know if you remember it at all.
Not as the standout. See, part of the problem with the list is that everything is of such high quality, right? So there wasn't anything that definitely is poking its head up and saying, "Hey, over here." I just remember it being. I don't want to say complex, but just a welcoming and super characteristic of what you just think of when you think whiskey. Like this is the quintessential not the, but a quintessential example of what a whiskey is.
Yeah, the Highland Park is a small. So earlier I mentioned that we would probably come back to talking about the circumstances surrounding the Macallan, the Highland Park, the Glenrothes, and the famous grouse and the naked malt. The naked malt is actually a famous grouse offering. It's the famous grouse naked, but then they dropped the famous grouse name and just call it the naked malt. And those are all distilleries owned by the Edrington Group, which is a group that was founded by the owner of the Macallan to sort of manage the profits of the Macallan for philanthropic and charitable ends. And the Edrington Group owns Macallan, owns the Highland Park, owns the Glenrothes, owns the famous grouse. In addition to those brands, the Edrington Group also used to own the Glenturret, which is a really small distillery. I don't know if you remember when I brought the Glenturret 7-year-old in. It's now owned by the chairman of the board and the deputy chairman of the board of Lalique Crystal, and they're making the whiskey in a way that is both traditional and carbon neutral, as a demonstration that you can make high quality whiskey at the highest level without destroying the environment. And it was that desire that to make this whiskey in an environmentally friendly way that allowed or that gave the Edrington Group the comfort to sell the Glenturret. And I feel like I just want to make a note that the Edrington Group is, along with the folks at the Glenturret, are concerned with making their whiskey in environmentally friendly ways and also in traditional ways to try to give you a tasting experience that is extraordinary, and also to try and keep the planet as green and clean and pristine as it can be.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yes, it is.
Oh.
Sarcasm aside, I think it's incredible. Now, back to the list. The Loch Lomond 18-year-old single malt, which I don't know if you remember, that was the Whiskey Advocates single malt of the year last year.
Yes.
And the nose on that was apple and smoke. Those were the two elements that we noticed that were most distinctive on the nose. And the sip was definitely caramel apple, and the other note here is candy. And I thought that it was a little more alcohol forward than I liked, but you didn't seem to have that same experience.
Yeah, that was an odd happening. I'm not sure what was going on there, but there's nothing to say but that it was delicious.
Yeah, it really was. We did score this one. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, and you gave it a 4.8 out of 5. That was the last of the whiskeys that we scored in the year. And the next and final entry on the list for 2024 was the Dead Rabbit, a blended Irish whiskey out of New York. The nose on this one was mostly candied notes, and the sip, which Matthew noted, transformed as it developed on the palate, left a major impression of toffee. And Matthew, in my notes here, it says that the first sip left Matthew speechless. So
yeah, I remember recommending this after the show to a couple of people. I would dearly like to revisit it because it I don't know, it was an odd experience, and I mean it is a whiskey, I guess you would call it commissioned.
By the Dead Rabbit Bar in New York, yeah.
Right.
And aged for 5 years. So it was their sort of 5th anniversary special that they did. They worked with a brewer in Ireland to create a blend, and then they aged it for 5 years and then released it on their 5th anniversary.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was an odd experience in a very good way, and I would dearly like to snag a bottle of that.
You want to revisit it on the show, or you want to revisit it in your personal life?
No, just personal.
There you go. Okay, there you go. So you knew this was coming because I said that it was coming before we launched onto our recollection of the list for 2024. So of all of the things that you tasted over the course of the year that made it to the list, Matthew, if I put you on the spot now, and I am, and ask you to make a statement / judgment, and I am asking you that, which of these is, in your view, the Sunday Scotch Society's sip of the year for 2024?
Are you asking me or are you forcing me? Because these are two different answers.
Let's start with, well, let's answer both. I'm asking you.
It's a toss-up. The Macallan and the Rabbit. If I'm forced, I don't know that I could really make a decision. Yeah, I feel, to be fair, I would need these lined up in front of me again.
But you feel like of all of the things that we tasted that did make it to the list, the top two for the year would have been the Macallan 18-year-old Sherry Oak and the Dead Rabbit blended Irish whiskey.
See, I think that part of the issue for me is that some of the others were quite close in terms of the experience. So for someone whose palate isn't super refined, the difference would stand out a lot more. So they might all be very, very good, but then the memory that persists is just because something was so different. That being said, if you call something a drop of sunshine, so the thing is, I think that some Macallans are actually kind of overrated, and so I'm also a little bit hesitant to just be like, to seem like a Macallan fanboy, which I'm not. But yeah, it would probably be the Macallan if I was pushed with gun to head.
Well, I have no gun, but I am pushing you. So, of everything that was tasted last year, I would have to agree that the Macallan 18-year-old Sherry Oak of what's on our list is definitely our sip of the year. The Kiss of Sunshine comment seals it for me as well. I want to definitely give the Dead Rabbit an honorable mention for sure. I also want to give a shout out to the Naked Malt and the Highland Park 12. I think both of those were quite extraordinary for their own reasons. And I really, really, really want to say to all of those who joined us in 2024 and the gamut of people who listened to our time together, I got to tell you, it's a broad range, my friend. And people really enjoy what we're doing. They tell me on a weekly basis, boy, I listened to the show and so on and so forth. In fact, I was out to dinner with a friend the other night. Somebody walked past me while I was leaning against my car waiting. And they said, there was this lady with a couple of kids, and she was like, good evening, because of course people have manners. And I'm there on my phone, so I glance up, I say, good evening. She walks past, and about 20 feet away from me, she stops and turns around. I said, are you the Scotch guy? I'm like, pardon me? She's like, yeah, the Sunday Scotch thing, right? I'm like, yes, ma'am. She's like, oh, my husband and I listen to you. He likes the show so much, and this, that, and the next. And I'm like, And to the husband, whose name I cannot remember now, my humble apologies, but Happy New Year and thank you for listening, sir.
Indeed, thank you.
And so I just want you to know, even if nobody is telling you, which I can't imagine to be the case,
No
people
one tells me anything.
well, even if they don't, people are listening and enjoying our banter. They're enjoying our recommendations. They're enjoying what we talk about. So, thank you to our listeners, and we really, really, really appreciate you taking the time to go on this journey with us. And now, Matthew,
Yes, sir.
it is time. It is time to do the thing where we begin our journey into 2025. And even though the name of the show is the Sunday Scotch Society, as the list already demonstrates, we are quite happy to diverge from the world of Scotch. And today, I am offering you an opportunity to truly explore whether or not you are a rye fan, as you continue to say. I brought for us to sip today the Whistle Pig Small Batch Rye 10-year-old, and it is, well, I'm not going to say anything. It was a Christmas present to me. It's my first time trying the Whistle Pig, because I wasn't really sold on it, honestly speaking, until my brother brought it for me for Christmas. I cracked open the bottle over the holiday, and I said, Matthew has to taste this. So I already come with some biases toward this bottle. Having clearly stated my bias, I will ask you to lead us through the journey with the Whistle Pig Small Batch 10-year-old rye.
Okay, before I do the thing, I don't usually pick up the bottle and dive into the text beforehand because I don't want to be biased.
Yeah.
However, with a rye, I want to know, is this rye or is this rye and some other stuff?
Sorry.
And this is a blend of straight rye whiskeys. Now I'm going to ask you, sir, because language being what it is, does this mean that this is 100% rye? Because it does not say 100% rye.
No. So whiskey is made from a mash, right? And the mash is the different grains that the distiller likes that add the flavoring profile that they want to express with their spirit. And the name bourbon, for instance, means that it has to have at least 51% corn in the mash.
Yes.
Rye means the same thing, that the prevailing grain in the mash has to be rye.
Yes.
So when they say a blend of rye whiskeys, what they mean is each whiskey in the blend conforms to that majority rye in the mash requirement. So no, it wouldn't
Just
be 100% rye.
Because 100% rye is exceedingly rare
Yeah.
in my short experience. However, I have come across it.
And you probably didn't like it very much.
No, that wasn't the case.
Oh, you liked it?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
I wouldn't put it tops so far. But because rye was the first whiskey that I came across at a slightly higher level than an alternative to gasoline or something that you want to bury deep in either eggnog or a mixed drink. There's a certain bias there.
I get you. I get you.
But yeah, let's crack this open and see what we got. Aged 10 years for you, sir. Let's see how this is. I should have had breakfast.
Oh, all that means is that.
Ooh.
Uh-oh. All right.
I am liking the nose.
So remember now, I'm going to lay back and let you lead on this. So I'm very curious. I'm just going to sit and watch as you experience it, and I would like to hear your thoughts.
First of all, just to look at it, that is a deep amber. There's the apple, somewhat subdued, very light candy. Just a hint of the butterscotch, and just on the nose, buttery. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going in for the first little. Oh, that is. Ooh, what is happening there?
All right. So
I have to tell you. Okay.
Yes.
So the experience. Oh wow. Okay, the finish is robust. Um, okay, so the smoother notes that I got on the nose are not immediately there, and in fact, it's quite. I don't want to call it thin, but it's like it's almost. You expect a very round, pronounced feeling on the palate, but it's quite open. It's quite a strange experience for me. And then as it coats, the tingle from the alcohol starts. You get the little bit of pepper, and then the alcohol sort of blooms on the finish.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice. It's not overly spicy.
Mm-hmm.
Hints of cinnamon, but on the finish only for me so far. Only one sip so far. You know, I have been classifying these as using a evening alone or with friends sort of categorization.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them by the fireplace, some on a hot, sticky night. This feels like spring to me. So easily something that I would sip in the afternoon with friends. It's not so much a comfort by the fireplace sort of thing. Just really alive is what I would call it. Sort of fresh, open. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll go in for another. Ooh. Bit of peppermint on the nose going in for the second one. Yeah. Spoke too soon. So, almost disappointingly light at first. But then it develops.
And when you say light, what do you mean?
Like when it first hits the palate, it's empty is not the right word, but it just it doesn't present a complexity right away. But after the wash, I'm getting all of these all of these notes coming out, including some fresh grass right now.
Yeah. So,
So not unpleasant at all. Just very surprising when it initially hits the palate, and then I think that just adds to the complexity of the experience, not just the notes themselves. So yeah. So we have not disproven the claim. that I am a fan of rye.
So I'm glad that you have noted the complexity, because for my money, that's one of the fatal flaws of rye whiskeys, is that because the rye is such a sharp grain, they tend towards rye whiskeys tend towards sharpness without complexity, and often that sharpness sort of sacrifices some of those other notes that you get in a good whiskey, the sweetness in the bourbon, the smokiness in the single malt or the blended scotches, you know? So what I like about this is that it has both the rye sharpness, but it also has on the palate as it is sitting and developing, it broadens out into, you know, for me, I can taste not quite sugar, but some mild sweetness. I can taste some very nutty sort of complexities. I can taste some nice sourness with you know, the sourness is light enough that it is amplifying the little sweetnesses that come from the mash. The complexity here is what I think made me say Matthew has to taste this. The Whistle Pig small batch rye 10-year-old for me is a great way for us to start 2025 on the Sunday Scotch Society, because this is a whiskey that I think we can drink maybe even later on in the year to see how it stacks up on a second tasting on the show.
I mean, we better, because this is screaming summer to me, along with fresh, crisp green apple slices in a salad with summer sandwiches and the need to jump in the sea thereafter.
I might do the whole let Matthew lead more often. Because what? What an incredible description. And I agree with that 106,000,000%. That's really that's the great way to put it, man. The only as we are letting things happen on the finish, which is a very long finish for me. I'm getting that grass note that you talked about, along with what is that? It's almost like plantain. You know,
I am getting a variety of just very nice vegetation notes. It's very difficult to describe besides saying that this is crisp.
Yeah, and we're drinking it neat. So I imagine that a couple of drops of water or even a block of ice would amplify that green apple summery sensation that you're getting. My brother Neil brought me this. Great work. This is splendid, splendid, splendid work. You, sir, have earned a place in my heart, separate and apart from where you sit, nonetheless. And Matthew thanks you too.
Thank you.
Matthew, we are here at the beginning of the year. I am not a New Year's resolution guy.
You said this last year.
Because I know I'll break them all anyway. But I do have some major desires for 2025 that I'm willing to share. One of which is I want to refine the processes in my life this year.
Mm.
You know, I want things to move with increased and improved efficiency. I want to be a more effective person in my undertakings this year. And I think
2 E's in 1 year? Effective and efficient. You started
yes,
off with efficient.
I did, but those are subroutines in the main program of refining processes. And I think I'm going to try to see everything through that lens as the year progresses. You know, what is the process here, and how can I refine it?
Okay.
I don't think that I have time this year for anything else as a major sort of undertaking. And I think that doing so, refining processes this year, will put me in a position to really make the most out of whatever is coming next in my life. So that's me. What about you?
I think I'm in a bit of an exploration mode. Not so much as in trying to find out and see more of the world, but more of an internal / applied exploration of how exactly more of like what are the processes going to be. I know what I need to do or achieve, but I'm sort of exploring the options as to how to get things done. So somewhat similar to what you're saying, but instead of refining what's in place, I'm sort of just rethinking, okay, from scratch, what do we need to do? Just pretend that there's nothing there right now and build from ground zero. So that's sort of where I am. Some of that is on the side of story, which I'm sort of bringing more to the forefront of what I'm doing. There are some projects in the works that are quite pivotal for things over at Arrowlink. And of course, just taking care of family. It's quite a lot of stuff to juggle in 12,025 Holocene era. So we'll see how this goes.
Okay. Hey, out of curiosity, how did the con happen?
The con did happen.
Yeah, how did it go?
It went well. It had some growing pains, or birthing pains, I should say. It's also an experiment for me in terms of, is this something, the presentation that I made, is this something that I want to further explore on my own YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera. I was happy with the presentation. The layout of things itself was a little bit difficult in terms of sound, right? So that's some of the birth and pains that would have happened. But I think that they did it was an enormous feat
to pull it off.
I think that they executed an enormous feat there. So I was very glad about it. And it's just I just have to say, to watch people who really are unabashedly proud of their fandoms and just delight in the almost childlike joy of celebrating and being in the moment, to watch people sing and jump up and down to a theme song is something else.
Yes.
Which, I'm not going to share that with all the world, but that was a sight to behold. And I'm very glad that so many people had so much joy in that moment.
Yeah, I'm glad too, man. I'm glad too. I thought I would get an invite, but I apparently am not.
Yeah, well, like I said, birthing pains and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
my own sort of approach to things. So definitely, we'll see what happens for next year. You know.
I hope that when next year approaches, I could be maybe perhaps a little more forceful about saying that I'd like to be there. But in any event, there it is. Thank you for a splendid conversation. Thank you for last year, my friend. It was such a wonderful journey. And this is a lot of fun. And I really enjoy doing it with you. So thank you. And happy 2025 or 12. Excuse me, happy 12,025 HE. And may all of your wildest and most fantastical dreams come true this year, my friend. Na zdrowie.
Ciao.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Check it out.